Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're going to be discussing the Split 1 schedule for the 2025 RLCS season. We got this news last Wednesday, which for me was a day before Thanksgiving. So into the chaos of that holiday break, haven't really had a time to sit down and do this. Wanted to get the off-season one on out time. So here we are. This is going to be coming out on Wednesday. So tomorrow is FIFA E. So looking forward to that. But in terms of the RLCS, we know a lot more about our first split than we did about a week ago. So, for starters, let's talk about how the format has changed. Were hints during the World Championship of how things were going to look a little bit different, and now we know a lot more of what that is like. So, day 1 and day 2 are still both going to be double elimination. Unlimited signups, as always. You narrow this down into a set of 32 teams. The next stage has 32 teams. So, on days 1 and 2, maybe day 1 isn't necessary if not enough teams sign up. That goes more for regions that aren't North America or Europe. But once you sign up, get to the top 32. Once you reach top 32, you play in what they're calling a double Swiss. Now, I assume by double Swiss, this just means they're going to divide up the 32 teams into groups of 16 and then run your, typical 5-round Swiss. This will be taking place on a Sunday. So we'll get into what exactly that calendar looks like as well. Day 4 is GSL groups. Now, I don't have an exact graphic for what GSL groups looks like, but to put things in perspective, I believe this is going to be very similar to what we saw at the RLCS World Championship in 2023 as well as 2022. So if I had to guess, it's going to be, you could do 4 groups of 4 or you could do 2 groups of 8. The only way that they're different is that in the 2 groups of 8, there isn't a rematch in that lower bracket, which I much more prefer. Worlds 23 and 22 was the 2 groups of 8, while the FIFA E World Cup was the 4 groups of 4. Or not the FIFA E World Cup, sorry, the Esports World Cup. So if you remember the Esports World Cup, there were a lot of rematches in that, qualifying game after a team had lost a series and won a series. If you have 2 groups of 8, there's not going to be a rematch there. So I much prefer that. We don't know exactly if that's how it's going to look, but fingers crossed. And then 5 and 6 is going to be a hybrid bracket. Now, this isn't explicitly stated in the article, I don't believe, but if they're talking hybrid format or a hybrid bracket and with the way these things broke down, I'm assuming we're seeing the AFL style format. Another big reason for this is that if we do have these GSL groups, then the top 4, like the team that wins their group, it's a lot easier to put them into the top 4 of that AFL style bracket than doing a Swiss tiebreaker. So with groups, you have 4 teams coming out 2-0 and then 4 teams coming out 2-1. That makes it very easy for sitting into an AFL style format bracket. So the big kicker with this is that only days 5 and 6 are going to be on the main broadcast. And I'll get into a lot more of the cons of that later. I have a cons section, as you can see, but that means that this Friday doesn't have a mainstream. It'll still have team streams, assumedly, and I'm assuming the Swiss stage will, but in terms of main broadcast, it sounds like we're moving away from the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and just into Saturday, Sunday. I'll talk about that later. The schedule for how things are going to break down, we start off immediately. So it's the 2025 season. We're starting on January 3rd. Which is a little bit crazy considering it's 2 days after the new year. I'm not sure when a roster lock is going to be. I think it's probably going to be before New Year's if I had to guess. But EU's first event, the first weekend, is January 3rd through 5th. Also, along with this, you're going to see some free weekends in here. Those are likely the weekends that CRL is run on. But for EU Event 1, it's January 3rd through 5th, and then January 10th through 12th. Meanwhile, for that second weekend of Europe on the 10th through 12th, there's also going to be the first 3 days of North America's first event. And then on the weekend of the 17th through 19th, that's North America's 4, 5, and 6. And then no Europe is being played because on the weekend of the 24th through 26th, that's when Europe's event 2 starts. And I believe that's probably when CRL is also going to have their, thing on the main broadcast. So it's going to be, in terms of what we see on the main Rocket League channel, it'll be Europe, North America, CRL, it actually starts with CRL, then goes Europe, North America, CRL, Europe, North America, in that kind of pattern. When I say Europe and North America, obviously those are the 2 main regions. There's 5 other regions at play. When it comes to which regions share the weekends, you have on European weekends, you also have South America and APAC. And then for North American weekends, you have Middle East, OCE, and SSA. Personally, I think this is the perfect distribution of who should be playing on which weekend. Because with MENA, that normally starts earlier in the day, let's say around 11 Eastern time, you can watch MENA and then you can go right into North America if you're trying to keep up and watch nonstop Rocket League. Same thing with Europe. You can watch Europe, and if you're still craving more, normally South America's starting by then. Along with that, you separate OCE and APAC because they normally play around the same time zones. SSA gets a little bit shafted. And while this is unfortunate to say, that's kind of par for the course. There's not really a place that you can put SSA that doesn't have them running at the same time as another region. You just have to pick if you want them running at the same time as Europe or if you want them running at the same time as MENA. I think it's better to put them running at the same time as MENA. So how they've distributed this, I love this. I think this is perfect. Might be the only thing I say is perfect on this board. Let's get into the pros. I'm going to start positive and then get more negative, unfortunately. The pros, there's a more stable path to the top 16. This was a big complaint last year as we had double elimination up to the top 16. And if you took 2 bad losses or had a tough draw, then you were missing the main event. The biggest example of this is obviously Carmine Corps in Event 5. They had to run into SA, who they had just a huge mental block against. And then they ended up losing to a peaking top Cougars in the lower bracket. They missed out on the top 16. That's a big reason why a lot of this needed to be changed in order to provide a more stable path to that top 16. Another team that got screwed was actually in the same event. It was Team Endpoint. I'm blanking on the 2 teams that they drew, but they had to face 2 other top 8 teams from the previous event to qualify for the top 16, and they couldn't do it. So I didn't really fault Endpoint for not making that event. They were definitely one of the best 16 teams, but the bracket did not go their way. This format, however, provides a lot more stability in the fact that going from 32 teams to 16 teams, you get the 5 rounds. Now, could you view this as, a little bit less stable in terms of getting into the top 8 from the top 16? Probably. But at the end of the day, it's very hard to find a time where groups, especially if they're seeded correctly after a good Swiss stage, don't end up having the right seeding in order to get the best teams through. So we don't know the minute details about how teams are going to be seeded, but if they get the seedings right for these groups, then more likely than not, we're going to see the best 8 teams in the top 8, or at least 7 out of the 8 teams. We're not going to see anything ridiculous, which, truth be told, same story with Swiss. The second pro is that we have AFL format and online play. Again, it isn't explicitly said AFL, but day 5 is going to have 8 teams, while day 6 is going to have 6 teams. That shapes up exactly like Worlds of 2024 did. So I'm assuming AFL style bracket. This, the groups, as I mentioned earlier, make this a perfect transition. And not only this, you get your 3-4 versus 5-6 matchups a lot more, which is super important for regions like North America and Europe, where we're trying to decide who are the 3rd and 4th best teams to send to LAN. The big example that comes to mind was Space Station of last year, always running into Gen G, and there were many debates on whether or not they were one of the 3 best teams or even one of the 4 best teams to send to the Copenhagen Major, but they never got the chance because they only ran into the 2nd best team, which unfortunately cleared them by a mile at that time. Another pro is that this gives teams more time to prepare for specific opponents. This one, I don't think this is a reach, but it's definitely an interesting one, and it would depend on whose perspective you ask. One of the common talking points about the Swiss stage is that you don't get to prepare for a specific opponent. You're always just trying to formulate your play style because you have no idea who you're going to run into past round 1. So this groups, you're going to know who's going to be in your path for your bracket and be able to make a game plan based on who's in your area. So on Friday, you'll go through the Swiss stage, you'll get through, and then on Sunday, you'll go through the Swiss stage, and then you'll have 4 days knowing exactly who your opponent is, who your potential next opponent is, and maybe even who the opponent you could see on that last matchup on this Friday. So it's a much clearer path. It could allow for teams to game plan specifically for one team, and I think that could lead to even, potentially earned upsets from younger teams or lower ranked teams that are willing to put in the hours to study a specific team to take them down. I think it could lead to some interesting situations, but I like the fact that, you'll also have time to build out, all right, these are the matchups we're going to be facing. Maybe we can try to make content and talk about that. That's up to the orgs, granted, and there's no history of the orgs actually doing that, but one can hope. And the last one in the pro section is that the top 8 from the previous event automatically qualify for the Swiss stage. Now, if you were to read this blanket statement before reading any of the rest of this board, you would think, oh, top 8 automatically qualifies to the top 16. That's not the case. So because the Swiss stage has moved up and it's now 32 teams in the Swiss stage, the top 8 from the previous event automatically qualify for this Swiss stage. It just avoids them playing in this double elimination bracket. It's a little bit more leeway. And then once you're automatically seeded into the Swiss, it's very hard to get upset per se 3 times, especially if there's 32 teams in this bracket rather than just the top 16. So top 8 automatically qualifying for Swiss. It gives the team streams like more opportunity to actually stream the hefty part of their schedule for each regional, but gives them a little bit of leeway. The one thing I'll mention here with this top 8 is that it's not done for Open 1, obviously, because we aren't just going to shoe in 8 teams. And then it isn't done for Open 4. So there's no protection, and I'll get to that a little bit later. There's no protection for the major teams, and there's no protection for any team from the previous split. Open 4 is the first Open right after the first LAN, and so every single team's going to have to go through this bracket again. The other thing I'll clarify with this is that it's not top 8 in points, it's top 8 from the previous event. So if you get top 8 in the first event, you automatically qualify for the Swiss stage here. But then if you go out 9th through 12th, you don't automatically qualify. You got to go through the whole thing again. So those are the pros. The cons, and I'll definitely get into these with a lot more detail. The cons is that there's no more Friday broadcast. There's no way around it. This is not good. This is really not good for the esport, in my opinion. Yes, Friday was more bouncing around, right? It was a Swiss stage. You kind of, went team by team. But at the end of the day, if you made it to the main events in years past, you were a top 16 team and you had a solid chance of getting on the main broadcast. Now, everyone knows that if you make top 8, you're going to make the main broadcast, especially in North America and Europe, right? But if you're a top 16 team, you're hoping maybe you're involved in one of the best matchups early on, like Shopify Rebellion. Shopify Rebellion in this format for Split 1 only would have been seen on the main broadcast twice on that Saturday and Sunday, and then they wouldn't have made the main broadcast any other times. With this Friday broadcast, you had opportunities to stream teams like the Muffin Men on Squishy's retirement tour. If that were to happen this year, that's done. If Shopify Rebellion, falling off a cliff, done. There were scenarios where it was like, in Open 6, I think Cloud9 had to face Snowmen in the lower round 3, in the 1 and 3. Not lower round 3, it would have been lower round 4. But they were both 1 and 2 in the Swiss stage. And both teams are still vying for a LAN spot, mind you. And they're facing in the Swiss. That happened on Friday, wouldn't have been broadcasted. So unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of potentially, high quality LAN contending teams losing in this group stage. And they're just going to have to talk about it on Saturday. We're not going to get a chance to see it on stream or talk about it on the mainstream until a day after it's happened. So losing this Friday broadcast is a major loss for the esport. I know that there will be people still watch partying and driving those narratives, but sorry to all the watch partiers, nothing replaces the impact of having a main broadcast and how that news gets distributed. So I think this is a massive regression, and it's going to be felt because you have to make top 8 to get on that mainstream. And I mean, that means only one time we would have seen NRG last year. And NRG is a massive brand. They were trying to put NRG on the main broadcast last year, even if they weren't going to be a top 8 team. So yeah, I'll stop talking about that one now because I could complain about that for a long time. Another complaint, or a con, I guess I will say, is that there's too much overlapping important Rocket League. I got into this a little bit with the schedule, but as you can see, Europeans Weekend 2 is happening at the same time as North America's Weekend 1. I mean, there's not much way else to do it, in fairness. But last year, we had the situation where North America was having their championship Sunday, while Carmine Corps was getting eliminated from actually just straight up major contention by the end of it. So actually, that happened twice. There was the one where North America was having their championship Sunday and Carmine Corps was getting eliminated from Event 5. And then there was the time where North America was having their championship Sunday, and then Carmine Corp was literally getting eliminated from the major. So the fact that we have this again here, where we're going to have teams in the Swiss stage, like it's going to be North America's busiest day of Rocket League at the same time as Europe's championship Sunday. And I think the fact that those overlap and you have to like make a choice whether you want to watch your favorite North America team or watch the mainstream is a little bit tragic. If there is like a team that's in dire straits in that last round of Swiss, like a top 8 team that's in round 5, there's going to be a lot of people going to that rather than Europe's championship Sunday. Now, I'm sure Europe doesn't care. They've got a good French fan base that is probably just going to tune in no matter what. But for someone trying to keep up with the entire scene, having such important events overlap, to me, is kind of a bit of a no-go. So, and the last con I'll mention is that there's no protection for the major teams. I mentioned this a little bit earlier when talking about the top 8 automatically qualify. There's no protection for major teams. Everything starts over in split 2. Now, you're going to keep your points, obviously. You're going to have better seeding, but there's no like automatic qualification. This is really a minor nitpick. I'm not going to like touch on this one too much. It'd be nice to clean that up, and it'd also be nice to go back to our old qualification format of the top 8 or top 16 invitational. But if that's not how they want to run things, I completely get that as well. So overall, that's a big breakdown of the schedule. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments in the comments section below. I said that awkwardly, but I'll be looking to answer, listen to what you guys think. If I've missed anything, please let me know, whether that be, benefits that I've overlooked or, drawbacks that I've also overlooked. So yeah, hopefully you all enjoyed. Hopefully this cleared a lot of things up. And personally, despite everything that I have said, I know I've probably been a little bit more on the negative side than the positive side. I am obviously very excited for this season to start. And it's going to be starting a lot sooner than maybe a lot of people would have anticipated. So I will see you guys on January 3rd. Actually, that's probably not true. It's Europe. I'll see you guys on January 5th for sure, because that is a Swiss stage that I will not be missing. But either way, see you guys soon.